All three of Dorgar's heads share some common features, things like the gums, the horns and the eyes as well, but it's actually easier to paint all three of these heads if you start with the colours that are unique to each of them. So that's what we're going to do, and you can paint any of the three in whichever order that you want, but I'm going to start out with the Nurgle head, and the colour you need to begin with this for your base coat is Deathworld Forest. Now this I'm going to be applying mostly using my medium base brush, but you might want to have a small base brush on hand. You'll see why in a moment. And all you've got to do, as usual, is get your paint ready by thinning it down with a little bit of water, and you're looking for a nice smooth consistency, kind of like that. And when you're ready, all you need to do is start applying this to the Nurgle head. Now, there's a couple of things to know about when you're doing this. The first is that you don't really need to worry about the features like the teeth and the wounds and things, because we're going to be painting those later on. But as you get further to the back of it, you can see that the skin starts to rip and you get the black scales showing through. And this is where you might want to have your small base brush just to carefully paint around these areas so you don't get any of the green on the black that you've already finished. Now underneath we do have that cream part on the chin, and we need to create a nice transition between the two colours here. So to begin with that, all you need to do is paint down to that wrinkle there like that. And it is already quite dark down there from the shading that we did earlier on. That's going to help later on when we add some more shade to bring those two colours together. That's these wrinkles back here. Just gently apply the paint like that in smooth lines just to help those two colours mix together there like that. I've applied 2 thin coats of Deathworld Forest now, and you can see it's built up to a good strong finish. And with that done, we're now ready to add some Ogryn camo to it next for our first layer. Now this I'm going to be applying using my medium layer brush, and as usual I'm going to use my palette here to thin the paint down, and it's going to help us get lots of control over it, because we want to be quite selective about where we paint this. So thin your paint down, as you can see here, and make sure you don't have too much on your brush. And what I do is just drag my brush along and twist it to bring the bristles to a nice tip there like that. And what I'm looking to do is to paint most of the skin here, but I want to purposely leave some Deathworld Forest showing in recessed parts. So for example, on the wrinkles on the side of the head here, what I'm going to do is just follow the raised parts of them. Your lines don't have to be really thin here. In fact, you are looking to paint most of it. But you can see doing this is really exaggerating all those wrinkles on the skin, which is perfect for Nurgle. So all we need to do now is carry on doing this all over the Nurgle head. With that layer now applied, you can see how it's really exaggerating all the features on the face and the expression as well, in fact. But it is quite bright now, so the next thing we're going to do is apply a shade just to darken it down again. I'm going to be using a Chthonian camo shade for this, and I'm going to apply it with my medium shade brush. And you want to get a really good amount of this because we are going to be painting it over most of the head. So get a good puddle on your palette, and then when you're ready, all you've got to do is start with a more open area on the skin. So I'm going to begin up here on the side and just start applying this, letting it settle in all the recesses and around all those little boils and things as well. Now something to watch for is when you get closer towards the pale colour going underneath the chin. When you get down there, just make sure the shade is thinner, so just use the area on top to get rid of the excess, and then as you get down here, just go a short distance over onto the more Rakarth flesh coloured areas like that, just to give them a slight green tint, just to help the transition between the two colours. But otherwise you're looking to paint this all over the green areas of the head, and once you've done so, give it about half an hour to dry. And with the shade now completely dry, we're ready to highlight the head. Now we're going to start out first of all by going back to Ogryn camo for the first highlight, and then we'll add a second very fine highlight of Flayed One flesh. But starting out with Ogryn camo, I'm going to use my small layer brush for this, and even though we've used this colour before, this time we want to be more selective about where exactly we paint it. So make use of your palette once more to get your paint under control and get that good tip on your brush. And what you're looking to do here is to looking to exaggerate all the wrinkles and things by adding the highlight to them. So for example, these wrinkles here, this time I'm going to just paint a fine line along the very top of them, just running all the way down to where that transition happens to the cream colour. There like that. And you also want to do the ends of the skin as well, where it ends back here on the neck, where it meets the scales, just go around the edges of them, there like that, just to give a nice bit of definition to the end of the green skin. And finally, complete the skin of the Nurgle head using a very fine highlight of Flayed One flesh with your small layer brush. And this you're looking just to paint small amounts and all the sharpest features. So for example, around the nose here, see I'm just picking out all those little sharp highlights just to bring them out. You're looking at areas like the cheekbone down here as well, and the eyebrow too. And on the wrinkles, you're just looking for a very small amount of this in more prominent areas. So I'm just going to do some running along this kind of area here, running all the way along, and also the boils too. And there we are, we've now finished the skin of the Nurgle head. Now there are still some of the details left to do on it, but we're going to come back to those later on, like I said earlier, because now we're ready to start the unique features of the Khorne head, which of course is red, so we'll be starting with a base coat of Mephiston red. Now this I'm going to be applying using my medium base brush, but like with the Nurgle one, it's a good idea to have a small base brush on hand for some of the finer details for it. But as before, we're just going to get our paint ready on the palette by thinning it down, and when it's about this kind of consistency, and you don't have too much on your brush, you're ready to start applying it. Now, on the Khorne head, there's not quite so much skin showing because it does have hair and horns as well. So you're really looking around here. But like with the Nurgle one, you just need to be careful when you're getting close to the other colours that we've done so far. So for the pale colour underneath, what you're really looking to do is go to about here, just beneath the jaw line there. And there's some wrinkles there to give a nice bit of distinction between the two colours. Further on back here, just be really careful as you get close to it and just paint up to the transition. And we'll use shade later to help blend those two together. But as with the Nurgle head as well, just be careful of the black scales as they're breaking through the Khorne skin back here. And you will need to apply 2 thin coats of this colour. Now that we've got a strong red base coat, we're ready to add some shade to the head. And we're going to be using Agrat's Earth shade for this, applied with a medium shade brush. And we're looking to paint this all over the red flesh that we've just done. So I'm going to get a good amount of this on the palette, build up a good little puddle there. And when you're ready, you just need to start, well, painting this onto the red skin. So what you need to do as you apply this is just make sure it settles nicely in all the recessed details. So especially around the face, so you can really get that expression there really nicely standing out. And be aware that when you do get to that transition between the colours, such as back there, like with the Nurgle head, still apply the shade just over that transition, but keep it thin just to aid with the blend of the two colours there. The shade is now completely dry, and you can see it's really helped to define all the details of the head and also given us a really deep red as well, which is perfect for Khorne. And now we're ready to begin highlighting it. We're going to use 2 colours once again. We're going to start out with an edge highlight of Evil Sun Scarlet and then a very fine highlight of Fire Dragon Bright. But starting out with Evil Sun Scarlet using a small layer brush, what we're looking to do here is make use of the palette to make the paint flow really smoothly so we get nice smooth highlights with it. So add water as much as you need till you're on about that kind of consistency. Make sure you don't have too much on your brush, and when you're ready, you're looking for all the sharper details on the head. So let's start on the face here, and we're looking at the snout, so there's a nice edge running all the way around the mouth, so I'm just going to follow that as neatly as possible around there like that. Now as we get around here, you can see we get the cheekbone as well, so let's go around there too, and then we've got the brow as well up there. So as you can see, I'm just following all these sharper details, being as neat as I can as I pick them all out. And finally, switch to your Artificer brush and Fire Dragon Bright just to add a very fine highlight to the red skin. And you only need a small amount of this just on the very sharpest features, such as on the snout just along there, on that corner as well. And any of the really sharp details that you can see, such as the very ends of the cheekbones down here, and also parts on the brow as well. And do this just to really bring that expression to life. Now that those highlights are applied, the red flesh is complete, and now we're ready to paint the hair and the fur on this Khorne head. Now this hair is going to be black, so we're going to start out with a base coat of Abaddon black, and then we'll highlight it using Eshin grey. But starting out with a base coat of Abaddon black, I'm using my small base brush to apply this, and I'm looking for lots of control here, so be sure to thin your paint down with some water and get those bristles to a nice fine tip. Because as you apply this, you want to see the hair that goes down towards the skin, and as you base coat on this area, just remember to bring the paint down to little points as the hair goes into it, just down there like that. But otherwise you're looking to get a nice solid base coat over all of the hair, so I do recommend applying 2 thin coats. And with that base coat now applied, we're ready to highlight all the hair and fur using Eshin grey with a small layer brush. Now for the strands of hair, all you've got to do is paint a line of this, just running along the top part of them, so just as neatly as you can. But as for the dreadlock parts we've got back here, make sure you don't have much paint in your brush and just lightly run it along them so that you catch all the raised detail of the texture. And with that highlight applied, the hair is now complete, and there's just one more unique detail to do on the Khorne head, and that is to paint the gore that's hanging from its mouth. Now to do this, you just need blood for the blood god. I'm going to be applying it using a medium layer brush, and this part's really simple. All you've got to do is get a good amount loaded on your brush, and when you're ready, you just need to paint this onto the gore, which you can see hanging just down here. All you need to do is paint a coat of this over that. We've already got it red because of the base coat of red earlier on the skin, but well, there you go, simple as that. And there we are. Now we're going to leave the corn head for the time being and move on to the third and final head, which is the Tzeentch one. And for this, the first base colour we're going to use is Stegadon Scale Green. And this is for the feathers and also a small part of the skin as well. Now, like with the other heads, I'm going to start out with my medium base brush to apply this, but you might want to have a small base brush on hand as well. And all you've got to do is get your paint ready in the usual way, and looking for that sort of consistency there. And when you're ready, all you've got to do is start base coating this onto the feathers and also a small part of the skin. So we're looking at this kind of area here, and on this head you've got quite a nice easy break line between the two colours here of the bluey green we've got and the pale part underneath, and you can see it's just where those feathers end, just down there. Be as neat as you can as you follow them along. Now towards the back of the head, as with the other ones, we've got some skin which breaks with the scales pushing through, and as before, just be really careful as you're going around this area, and you will need to apply 2 thin coats of this colour. With the base coat built up, we're now ready to add lots of definition, especially to all those feathers, by applying a shade. And we're going to be using Colia Green shade for this, applied with the medium shade brush. And as with the other 3 heads, we're just looking to get a good puddle of this colour on the palette. See, it's a lovely kind of bluish green we've got there. And get a good amount on your brush. And all you've got to do is just start painting this onto all of the areas that you painted with Stegadon Scale Green previously. And you can see immediately it settles in all the little recesses around those feathers. And just be really careful when you get close to the pale part underneath the head. Really be careful so that you don't get any of this Colia Green shade running down onto that paler skin. Once that shade's completely dry, we're now ready to start adding some highlights to that Tzeentch head. Now I'm going to be using 2 colours for this. We're going to start out with a highlight of Sotek Green, and then we'll finish with a very fine highlight of Temple Guard Blue. But starting out first of all with Sotek Green, I'm going to be using my small layer brush to apply this, and it's really important here that you make use of your palette to make sure that paint's flowing really easily from your brush. So add a bit of water to it and twist your brush to get a nice tip, and there we go, the paint's flowing really easily and we're ready to go. And what we're looking to do here is to pick out all the sharper details of the blue areas on this Tzeentch head. So to start with, if we go right down to the face, just get your hands so they're nice and steady, and you're looking to follow all these sharper details of it. So just around there, around the eye, and as the detail sort of flicks up there at the back, there like that. Just really bringing out all of these features. Now as for the feathers, what you need to do is keep your hands as steady as possible and paint a line down the centre of each one. So there we go, down that central ridge just there. And then you want to go either side of it as well. So again, just turn your brush so you've got a good angle on it, and as steadily as possible, just paint those lines on either side. There we go. Now at the back, what we're looking to do is to go around the tears in the skin. So just as before, just be careful that you don't get any of this colour on the black scales as they're ripping through. And finally, we're going to add a fine edge highlight of Temple Guard Blue using our Artificer brush. And this is just to go on all the finest edges of all the detail on here. So just all the tips of each of the feathers. With that highlight applied, the feathers are now done, and we're ready for the next unique feature on the Tzeentch head, and this is going to be the beak. Now for this, we're going to start out with a base coat of XV88, and then we'll shade all over it using Agrax Earthshade. Once that's completely dry, we're going to reapply XV88 to start to brighten the beak up again, and then we're going to move on to Tau Light Ochre for the first highlight, then we'll do a very fine highlight of Screaming Skull to finish it off. But starting out with our base coat of XV88, I'm using my small base brush to apply this, and as usual, just make use of the palette to get the paint ready, and get a good amount on your brush. When you're set, all you've got to do is, well, base coat this onto the beak. So what I'm going to do is paint most of this, because at the very back of it where it meets the feathers we will be adding some more of a muscle kind of tone later on. So you want to paint most of it. On the bottom you're going up to around about that kind of spot there. On the top it's around about there. But if you're not sure, just use the box art to guide you, and you will need 2 thin coats of this colour. Next, with your medium shade brush, apply Agrax Earthshade all over the beak, making sure it settles nicely in all the recessed details. When that shade's completely dry, the next thing to do is to go back to XV88, but with the medium layer brush this time, and we're going to reapply this to the beak, but this time just being a little bit more selective about where exactly we put it. You're looking to bring out all the details, such as these little ridges on the beak, so that look a bit like teeth really, so just a small amount of paint on those, and leave the shade showing in the recessed areas either side and around there as well. But as you get to these flatter areas, just reapply this colour across the entire area like that, just to really bring out those details. Next, we're going to begin adding some highlights, starting with Tau Light Ochre. I'm using my small layer brush for this, and what I'm looking to do is to paint a line following all the sharpest details along the beak, such as this little ridge we've got partway down it there, and also these tooth-like spikes coming out the bottom. And finally, complete the beak with a fine highlight, this time of Screaming Skull, applied using your artificer brush. And what you're looking to do is to paint this in the very sharpest details. So the tip of the beak just down here, and also these little sharp tooth-like bits as well. So just very fine highlights, just to really bring out those sharp details. And there we are, we've now finished all the unique parts on all three heads, and we're ready to start painting the parts that appear on all of them. And we're going to begin with the gums and tongs, and for this we need three colours. We're going to start with a base coat of Bugman's Glow, and then we'll shade all over these areas using Druchii Violet. Once that's completely dry, we'll add a highlight using Cadian Flesh Tone. But starting out with our base paint, we're using Bugman's Glow, and I'm going to be applying this mostly with my small base brush, but I do recommend having a small layer brush on hand because some of these details, as you see, are quite tricky to get to. So get your paint ready in the usual way, and when you've got a good amount on your brush, all you've got to do is start picking out these parts on the heads and, well, base coating them with this colour. So I'm going to start on the Tzeentch head, and really we're looking at all the kind of gums around about here, but don't forget to do the tongs as well, and also the inside of the mouth. And it can be tricky to get to some of those parts, so just take your time as you're painting them. Now on the Nurgle head there are a few extra parts to do, and that is these open wounds that you can see scattered around it, and just be really careful to paint this colour in those. And also there are some maggots as well, so make sure you get those, and you will need to apply 2 thin coats of this colour on all these areas. Once you've finished applying that base coat, the next thing to do is to shade all over it using Druchii Violet. Now you don't need very much, so I'm using my small base brush so I can keep it under control as I apply it. You can see around here I'm just being really careful not to get the colour on the other areas that we've already finished. Once the shade's completely dry, add a highlight of Cadian Flesh Tone following all the sharper details using your artificer brush. And with that highlight applied, the tongs, gums, and of course the wounds and the maggots are now complete, and we can start painting the next detail, which is going to be to paint all of the eyes. Now for these, the important thing to do first of all is to make sure that the eye sockets are dark enough, and if you don't think yours are dark enough, just paint a little bit of Agrax Earthshade into them just to darken them down. But I'm quite happy with how dark they are on my model already, so I'm just going to go straight to the colour that we need for the eyes, which is Uriel Yellow. Now this I'm going to be applying using my artificer brush because of course the eyes are really small, but the thing to do here is to make sure that you thin your paint down the right amount. You need to make sure that it's flowing very easily, but that you don't have so much on your brush that you get a blob of water and lose control of it. So just use your palette to gauge that it's kind of like that. See, it's flowing easily, but I don't have too much on my brush. Make sure you don't have, I got a good fine tip there, and when you're ready you just need to, well, pick an eye and as carefully as possible paint it with this colour. So I'm going to begin on this Tzeentch head here, and you can see I'm just bracing my hands, holding them as steady as possible, and I'm just going to touch the brush to the eye there like that. And you just want it to start building up the colour very gently there, and you don't want to be getting frustrated with it trying to apply the paint so that you make a mistake on there. Just keep your hands as steady as possible and build up the colour steadily. And there we go, all three heads are almost done. We haven't done the teeth or the horns yet, of course, but that's because these will be painted in the same way as all the rest of the bone on the miniature, which we're going to need to do on Archaon as well, so we're going to do that later on. And speaking of Archaon, we're going to start painting him next as we take a look at painting his armour and the armour on Dorgar as well.